Karla, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Really appreciate it. How are you doing? No, first of all, congratulations on your 25th anniversary for coming to Canada 25 years
Woohoo!
ago from Mexico. Super exciting. How did you guys
Yes.
celebrate?
I celebrated on my own with a nice glass of wine and ordering takeout. And I was like, "Yeah, happy anniversary to me!" And then I was on my WhatsApp family chat, just like remembering that day. And yeah, it was pretty emotional too. I got a little emotional yesterday on my own. I kind of
For
felt
sure.
silly about it, but yeah, definitely took a little bit of time to celebrate. A quarter of a
Yeah,
century.
I'm sorry, a quarter century. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's huge. And
Mhm.
I follow you on social media very passionately. I really appreciate the posts that you share, the honesty that you bring to the post, the authenticity. I think it's really important sharing that message, and I
Mhm.
appreciate how you do that. But for folks that are, because I have a million and million followers on here, but for folks that a few folks that are watching this or listening to this, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, Karla?
Yeah, so I am originally from Mexico, and I came to Canada with my family when I was 18. So right after finishing high school, it was a decision that my parents made. I really didn't have any say in it. It was just like, things were not that great in the north of Mexico in the late
Sure.
90s. It's when all of like the drug cartels and like the all of what you watch now on Netflix. I lived that. Like I actually lived
Wow.
the real things, and it wasn't that safe for our family. And that's when my parents decided to give us a better future by coming to Canada. And we didn't know anything about Canada. And we arrived in a U-Haul. We drove. We drove
Yeah.
from
Wow.
Mexico and then landed here. We didn't know anybody. We had really, like, probably like many immigrants, we just came here with an idea, with a dream, but really we didn't have a big plan on how to do it. We just said we're just gonna venture and figure it out. And hats off to my parents, they were 45 and 47 respect, like all each. And it
Yeah.
was crazy. Like I was the youngest,
Yeah.
so they're the ones who really took the risk. I was just starting my young adult life, and it was them who had to give everything up and really start from scratch. So it's
Yeah.
been 25 years later. It's there's lots of ups and downs, but here we are.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I know you shared on the post that like I just turned 43 on July 5th, and when I read this comment that you made about thinking they were, at that age to just get up and go like that is I couldn't do it. I couldn't
Yeah.
do it. It's an incredible
Mhm.
courage that to take that step, right?
Absolutely. And my dad was an established entrepreneur. He
Mhm.
is a veterinarian doctor by profession, and he had his hospital, growing career. He had been practicing for over a decade in his own practice, so he had built up his reputation. My mom was a school principal, like a private school principal, so they were established
Yeah.
professionals, right? So it's not
Yeah.
like it wasn't an easy decision because they had to sell the business. They had to quit their long-standing job as a school principal. So
Yeah.
it was definitely something that will forever be grateful that they did, because our lives changed completely.
Yeah. So what was it like for you at 18, I think you said, right?
Hmm. So as an 18-year-old, I it was interesting because I was excited about it because most of my friends were going away. So even though my dad was an established entrepreneur, there's something that happens in Mexico and probably in many countries that are developing or considered developing countries, where if you don't know the right people, there's only so much you
Right.
can grow. And we didn't knew the right people. We were just like a middle class, hardworking family. So there was no lack of food in our table, but we didn't live in opulence. So I was in a private school, But I was in a private school as a scholarship kid. So that was my job. My job was to do well in school so that my parents could afford the 50% tuition, and the other 50% was up to me to do well in school. But I really was with living with really wealthy kids
Mm,
that really didn't really match my own social environment. So
right.
all of my friends were going away to Europe. They were going away to the US. They were going away to like abroad to study in university. And had I stayed in Mexico, there's no way my parents would have been able to afford that. So for me, coming to Canada was sort of like, okay, like at least I'm going somewhere. Little did
Yeah.
I know what was to come. And when I came here as an 18-year-old, it was tough. It was really tough because my middle brother ended up going to Montreal, and then my older brother actually stayed back in Mexico because he was already halfway through his med school studies. So I became the only child with my parents, and my parents realized that there were a lot of struggles. They couldn't get a job because they didn't have the Canadian credentials,
Right.
Canadian
Yeah.
experience, so on and so forth. And me as an 18-year-old, I was able to get part-time jobs and go into university. So I was doing full-time university and 3 part-time jobs just to
Wow.
help with the family, pay rent, put food on the table. So very quickly I grew up. I had to grow up
Yes. Yeah.
really, really, really quickly, coming from an environment where my sole responsibility, that's my dog, I told you they were
No
gonna
worries.
laugh.
Yeah.
My sole responsibility was to do well in school. All of a sudden I came here and my responsibility grew. You have to do
Mhm.
well in school because that's still how I grew up. But
Yes.
now I had to help pay rent and food and whatnot. So it was really tough. My English wasn't that great either. And I decided to go into journalism of all things. So that first year was really tough. And I remember like reading, sitting at the front of the class and like not really understanding what the teacher was saying with a
Yeah.
dictionary in my hand and trying to
Oh,
figure out what
wow.
it was. And then I decided for some dumb reason to take Canadian history in my first year, which was a prerequisite. And I didn't know anything about Canada. That was my worst grade too.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of challenges, and then also socially, I felt like I was living in 2 different worlds. In my home, I was living like with my mom and dad. I was living my Mexican life, right?
Right.
They expected me to live the way and act the way we were used to in Mexico. But then you go to a university that is in a country that is so liberal,
Yes. Yeah.
um, and all of a sudden you're in living parallel lives and trying to fit in, in a new world and trying to conform to the traditions that we grew up, in our country. So as a young adult, it was very tough to navigate, really, really tough to kind of keep those worlds separate
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
trying to fit in both worlds. So it was quite the journey, definitely.
Which city did you guys land into?
Yeah, we landed into Ottawa,
Into
and
Ottawa. Okay.
yeah, into Ottawa, and I went to Carleton University.
Yeah, yeah, nice. Yeah. I came I actually my parents I was born in the UK,
Hmm.
but both my parents are from Sri Lanka, but I came when I was 6 first for a holiday, and then when I was 7 and lived with my grandparents. But when I went to school in Winnipeg, elementary school at that point, I was the only colored kid in the entire
Mm.
school of, I think it was like maybe 500. So it was very interesting, and I still had a British accent at that point, and people didn't know where Sri Lanka was. They just said, "Ah, you're Indian."
Oh my god.
It was just a unique experience, and I think similar to what you were saying, the identity issue for me. I wanted to fit in and just be part of the Canadian life, and uh, but it was we had a different life at home as well. So it was interesting. I just remember, this is such a silly example, but it was so um emotional. When you're a kid, these little things are so emotional, that I used to always wear dress socks, like, just I don't know why, that's just how we dressed in the
Hmm.
UK. And everyone had these white tube socks, and I kept crying to my mom that I wanted these white tube socks, that all the
Oh,
kids were wearing. And she's like, "Those don't look good at all. Like, you should be." She wanted us to dress well and da da da.
yeah.
And but it is your parents in this kind of world, and then you in another world, and you're trying to balance both those. So your comment on the identity, I think, really resonates for me.
Hmm.
Um,
And as immigrant kids, we never want to disappoint our parents. I don't
yes.
know if that happens to you, but for me, like I never wanted to disappoint my parents, and I wanted to do well for them and by them. And if I were ever doing something that would disappoint me, it would be really tough on me. But at the
Yeah.
same time, I kind of at 18, like I wanted to be my own person too, right? But it's
Yes.
like, what is my new identity now? Like now I don't know. Like I have one piece of the puzzle on this side and then another one that's actually quite interesting and new and liberating on this other side. But it's like I don't want to disappoint my parents either. So it was
Yes.
I grew up with in that at that time frame in my life, it was very conflicting, like lots of internal conflict. But at the end of the day, I think I made it my goal, whether it was that I was going to be more Canadian or more Mexican, my identity became doing well in school. So that was my
Awesome.
job, and making sure that I was able to make enough money to help my parents. And there were times because my dad's recertification credentials and exams were very pricey. And we only came with a limited amount of money, that we very quickly blew through it.
Sure.
So then there were many times where I told my dad, "No, you're not quitting. You're telling me not to quit. I'm telling you not to quit.
Yeah, yeah,
And if you don't have enough money for those exams, I figure it out. I'll work 4 or 5 different jobs, and we'll make sure that we have
yeah,
enough money for you to make that to take those exams." And there were times where I had to pay that to make sure that the sacrifice that my parents made was not in vain.
yes.
So yeah, it was quite the journey. And um, back then there weren't that many settlement services. There were
Oh,
not
yeah,
those services available. So actually
yeah.
there were none. Literally, because we drove, so we went through the border. They looked at our passports, they stamped our visa and said, "Welcome to Canada." And we're like literally standing in the border of what was the border? Ogdensburg, because it's closest to
Okay.
Ottawa, Ogdensburg, New York. We're literally standing in that border, and it was 11 o'clock at night,
Oh,
and
wow.
we're looking at each other, and we're like, "Now what?"
Yeah.
That was our
Wow.
first day. Welcome to Canada.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, so
So yeah, it was
scary.
crazy. They just give you back the papers, and they're like, "Well, here's the office to go get your social insurance number, and here's the office to get your health card. Welcome to
Yeah.
Canada. Now go."
Wow. Wow. Yeah, incredible, incredible. I can't imagine how, uh, people have challenges now, but yeah, back then, there, as you said, there weren't those services. Um, how was it like driving through? That must have been
Oh
quite
my
the
god.
experience as well.
That was quite the journey because we literally crossed the entire, like, all the United
The
States. We lived
US,
in the
yeah.
Yeah, we lived in the border with the United States with Texas. So at
Okay.
least we didn't have to cross Mexico too. So we were in the border, and then it took us 4 days, I think, 4 or 5, 6, I can't even remember. But I was sitting in the middle seat because it's just
Yeah.
like, a U-Haul. So I'm in the
Yeah.
middle
Yeah.
seat. My brother is driving. My oldest brother is driving. My mom's on the other side, and I have a cat. My cat in the middle. There was no air conditioner in that U-Haul, and it was
Oh,
in the middle of
wow.
the summer, and there was only an AM radio.
Wow.
It was a long trip.
Yeah, yeah. So journalism shifted into the business world. You're an entrepreneur.
Mm,
Yeah, no?
kind of. So I finished journalism, which to me that's a huge accomplishment because I had to learn English while I'm studying journalism, university level journalism. And funny enough, that back then I also I wasn't like it was. I was one of the very few minorities in my classroom, and I remember always sitting with, a girl that was from Egypt, and then another one that was from Sri Lanka, actually.
Oh, cool.
And it was the three of us. Like, we were like the visible minorities in the classroom, and we kind of hung out with each other, and because we kind of understood what we were all going through. And then I ended up realizing that there were so many talented students in my class, and I was never going to write at the level that they would, or I was never going to be a journalist at the level that they were. But my skills were with people. I realized that I had really good social skills, and I went into public relations. So I did a postgrad
Oh,
in
nice.
Toronto at Humber, in PR, and then I moved to Toronto and lived there for 6 years, and I had a pretty successful career in public relations. And but then I realized, and I was traveling a lot, and I was already married, and I realized that if I wanted to have a family, that
Mm.
life wouldn't really be conducive to have a family.
Right. Right.
And in that moment, my parents had finally opened their hospital again, their veterinary clinic in Ottawa. And I was going back and forth from Ottawa to Toronto, Toronto to Ottawa, to help them, because we laid
Right.
down floors, we knocked down walls.
Awesome.
And so it was a family affair, and it was super exciting. And seeing that excitement, I was like, oh my God, this is so cool. I kind of want to do something of my own. This is
Yeah.
it's contagious, like, right, that energy, that entrepreneurial energy. I think it's
Yes.
contagious. And then one day I told my parents, you know what, guys? I remember I was in my Toronto office, and they were in Ottawa. They'd already opened their business, and I had gotten a dog that I
Okay.
fell in love with. It was like the dog of my life.
Yeah.
And I said one day, I'm like, I called them, and that story that I told you, that we never want to disappoint our parents as immigrants. So
Yes.
I told them, all I want to do is open up a pet store. And I kind of like, I don't want to disappoint it, because they've gone through all of this for me to just open up a
Yeah.
pet store.
Yes.
And there was like silence in the line, and I was like, oh my God, like, I'm going to disappoint them.
Yeah.
And then their answer was like, so why don't you? And I was
Oh,
like,
wow. Nice.
okay, okay. So
Awesome.
so
Yeah.
that was like, yeah, why don't I? And it was kind of like a slap in the face. It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
they've gone through everything they've gone through. What's stopping me from going after what I want to go after? And I
Yeah.
think that so why don't you was kind of like the green light for me that I needed.
Yeah.
And like, then that was it. Like, I went full on my idea of opening up a pet store, because I wanted to have a family and be able to, dictate my hours of operation, which is a big
Right.
lie, by the way, when you're
I
an
was gonna
entrepreneur.
say, yeah.
And I wanted to bring my dog to work, and that was my first business. I
Yeah.
opened it with my husband, and I opened it, like, when we like opened the doors to the public. It was when my first kid, my son, turned 1.
Oh,
So it
wow.
was,
Okay,
I
nice.
took him to daycare for the first time, and then I opened the store for the first time. So I was
Nice.
a young mom too, which that's on its own, that's a different challenge.
Yeah, yeah, of course. Of course.
So
Yeah.
I used my maternity leave to write the business plan, get financing. We moved from Toronto to Ottawa in that year too, because we needed family support.
Yeah.
And we decided to open the business in Ottawa. So yeah, it was a pretty hectic year, that maternity leave year.
Yeah, so much going on.
Hmm.
I was lucky I got to work with my father who went
Mm.
into business very early. um and kind of watched him and worked with him, take on these different projects, and I fell in love with it as well. He had always been doing that even when we
Hmm.
were kids, so I always knew I wanted to go into business. I thought I wanted to go into law school first and get that base, and it's a good I think a good degree to have when you're in business. But yeah, the thing of working together as a family unit, I think, was incredible. The relationship that I have with my father
Mm.
in that sense, it's obviously father and son, but friends as well. business partners. Like it was really nice, and I think I really treasure that relationship very much. And I think about that with my kids now too. My kids are 3 and 6, but for them to realize that this is something that supports us,
Mhm.
so I didn't really get paid, when I worked with my dad. I mean,
Mhm.
sure, if I wanted to go do something, he supported, but there wasn't any set salary. Like, there's no like you clock in now, clock
Oh,
out,
I
you get
know.
paid, right?
I lived like that in Mexico when he had the clinic. It was
Yeah.
weekends. I was the cage cleaner, and I didn't get paid.
But I think those are important,
Oh
right?
yeah, you appreciate
You
where money
appreciate,
comes from, right?
yeah, you appreciate where it comes from, and I was lucky enough to be around difficult conversations that my father had, whether it was with employees or vendors or anything like that. And I think that was very key for me too, because I think it's nice to be, think everything is so rosy, but you have to have this ability to, um, accountability, right?
Hmm.
And to lay out expectations, and when those expectations haven't been met, well, how do you handle that conversation? And I think early on, I think my dad kind of held me away from that, just to, oh, you don't have to worry about this, go to this. But as I started working with him and seeing that, I kind of realized the sacrifices, the challenges, all of that he made. So are your kids involved at all in the business? Okay, awesome.
Yeah, they are. Well, they had their own business. So when they
Oh
were
wow,
when they
okay.
were your kids' age,
Yeah.
one day they said the magic words. Actually, the words I should never tell a parent if you're a kid.
Okay.
I'm bored. And it was rainy and it was one of those days and I was like, okay, so if you guys are bored, make some cookies and go around the neighborhood and sell them. And they're like, what?
Oh nice.
They're like, you're bored? Okay, let's do
Yeah.
something productive. So
Yes.
anyway,
Yeah.
so at that time, I was a hardcore vegan. And I'm
Okay.
like, okay, so let's come up with a recipe of chocolate chip cookies, a vegan chocolate chip cookie that is actually good and moist and awesome. So my son is he just has this ability to read dough.
Okay.
It's like it's sorcery for me. So anyway, so between him and my husband, they created the recipe that evening, and their cookies were
Nice.
actually really good. So they
Nice.
literally went. I still have pictures. They're like two little kids with like their little Tupperware containers, going from home to home, selling the cookies at a toonie per cookie.
Oh
And one
wow.
home said, "Oh my God, these are expensive cookies." And they're
Yeah.
like, "But they're really good." And I actually have pictures of them like going from home to home. I was
Yeah.
with them, right? But I was kind of like staying away.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they sold the cookies. Like they sold the cookies in about like less than an hour.
Yeah.
And they were
Wow.
and they were so good that the person that complained that were very expensive came later on and knocked on our door and said,
Yeah.
"Oh my God, I need a dozen cookies because these are really good."
Awesome.
So they
Awesome.
created the Spoon Liquors Vegan Bakery, and they created a whole bunch of different flavors, and they were selling at different shows, and they were doing catering.
Wow.
And I was sure that that business was going to put them through university, but then COVID hit, and then
Oh
kind of went
man.
down the hill.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they've had that experience, and it was really cool because if they wanted to do something, if they wanted to buy themselves something, they learned about cogs, they learned
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
marketing expenses, they learned about like revenue, net profit. And it was
Awesome.
really cool because it was about math. Like they were learning math about making the batter and everything. It was all math.
Yes.
Then finances, they were learning how to divide the money. And then they were learning how to write because I wouldn't do the social media for them, but they were like,
Oh,
no, you're going
awesome.
to do the social media. So you're going to learn how to write,
Yeah. Yeah.
like a social media post. So it was a very cool learning experience.
Yeah.
Um, and
That's
and they loved it and they still talk about it. And now, for some reason, well, obviously, but now, like my oldest kid now wants to have his own studio. He's already, because he's an
cool.
artist, so he's going like, he's like, I want to go into visual arts and then I want to do business because I want to have my own studio. And then my little girl, she's also thinking about some sort of business. And at the table is the conversation is all about business too. So
Awesome.
it's really cool to see that. And then within our businesses, it's almost it's now a given that if there's summer or March break or whatever, the first question they ask is, where are we working? Are we working at business A? Because we have a few.
Yes.
So which hat do we put on today? So it's
That's
like, okay,
awesome.
good. It's a given. And right now, actually, my oldest kid is working at one of our stores right now. So
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
it is what it is. This is a family business.
Yeah, yeah, and I think critical, right? Just for them to understand all the things that you mentioned, but um, and I think it's great skills for whether they stay in the business or not in the future. Great skills for them to build, even if they go into a career path.
Hmm.
They always talk about bringing that entrepreneurial energy to your career. Yeah,
And it's just figuring it out, right? Because when you have a business, it's like you have to figure a lot of things out on your own. And when they had their little cookie business, I let them figure out a lot of things on their own. So now when they come and then they have an issue or they have a problem, it's like, okay, try to figure it out on your own. And
yeah,
they're like,
yeah,
ooh, okay, so maybe I should be doing this. Ah, there you go. Awesome.
yeah,
So
yeah.
so yeah, these are transferable skills, whether you open a business or you go into a career. It's like that ability to think on your feet and
Yes.
figure it out.
Yeah, yeah. What's your work-life balance like?
Hmm.
How do you maintain that? What are some tips and tricks?
So I've been in business for 13 years now. I'm gonna say that the first 5 years there was no balance because I was also a
Yeah,
new mom.
yeah,
So it was very hard. It was actually I went into burnout.
yeah,
I had a breakdown, and there was a
yeah,
point
for
where
sure.
I couldn't do it anymore because it was just too much.
Yeah,
As a woman, maybe some men experience this, but this definitely happens with women business owners, and young mom with business owners, where especially if you're a new mom, you think
mhm,
that you're the only one who knows how to care for your baby. And you're
yeah.
very like protective and you just want to do it all and you don't trust not even your husband because your husband's not doing it right.
Yeah,
And as an entrepreneur, if you remember when you opened your first business, well, it depends because you had experience with your dad, but it certainly happened to me that when you open your first business, you want to do everything yourself because
right.
nobody knows how to do it properly, and you just want to learn everything, and you want you
Yes,
micromanage a lot.
yes,
So I was
yes,
doing both things at the same time. I was doing the caring for the baby and trying to operate the business on my own,
yes.
and I was doing this with both things, and it was impossible. You can't. So we were. I remember. Oh my god, those days. I get chills
Are
just
you are
like
you
thinking
are
of
you
this.
getting the feelings back?
Oh
Yeah.
my god, yeah. No, I remember. And there's pictures. Like if you go on my social media, there's pictures of because it was a pet store, the first business that I had. I would have my dog on one dog bed, and then I would have my baby on another dog bed on the floor.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And then I would be doing like the books and like inventory and purchasing and whatnot. And then I would be like selling with my baby on a baby carrier.
Yeah.
And sometimes with the kid that was in daycare, I would bring him back from daycare into the store, feed him in the back office. I had a grooming tub for dogs in
Yeah,
the back, so sometimes I had to give him a shower, like
sure.
the bath, like nighttime bath,
Yeah.
in the dog grooming tub. And I had a playpen in the back, so it was insane. It was
Yeah,
insane. There was no balance whatsoever,
yeah,
and it was not healthy at
yeah.
all, obviously. And then after 5 years, I was like, I can't do this anymore. Had a breakdown, and actually, I was forced to kind of, like make sure that I created some strategies. So then I became the master delegator by necessity.
Awesome, yeah.
And because I still wanted to learn about how the business was doing, then it was a master delegator with master super accountability for my staff. And
Yeah,
then that's when I created systems and, like repeatable systems that I could just delegate to somebody else, and then accountability meetings and sales targets and meetings and whatnot. So basically, right now, 13 years later, it wasn't overnight. 13
Yeah.
years later, I'm able to say, like today, you know what? I'm going to take the morning off. I'm going to go for a hike with my kid and my dogs.
Yeah.
Um, and we just came back from 2 weeks off traveling in Newfoundland. The summers I usually have them off, so like I usually spend 2-3 months with very little light work, and
Yeah.
all I do is my accountability meetings. And I have amazing staff as well. Like my staff, oof, like they've been with me. Some of them have been with me since the very beginning.
Oh,
They know
awesome.
more than I do, and I love it.
Yes. Yeah. That's awesome.
And it's just accountability. Like we created the systems, and then now it's just the accountability meetings that we do have, sales targets, and lots of incentives and whatnot, so that they stay with us
Yeah.
and they continue to grow the business as well.
Yeah.
So
I
yeah, so the balance right now is where it's good, but
yes.
it wasn't overnight.
Yeah. Yeah. I went to we went camping for the first time, like taking my kids camping for the first time. And where did we go? Arrowhead Provincial Park,
Hmm.
which was beautiful if you haven't gone before. And but I didn't have internet. And I'm
You're like, oh.
yeah, so it was, I'm not, I'm lucky we've grown in the business. There's a great team that manages things. But I always still like to keep
Hmm.
um an eye on things, right?
Oh
And
yeah.
and then, and usually what happens is you get back and then there's a flood of emails that you have to go through. So that's been challenging for me. I think
Hmm.
my dad was actually very much a micromanager. And and I think I have that in me, but I learned to do what I wanted to do in business, that I had
Hmm.
to scale that way. I had to delegate and find good people, right? At
Hmm.
the end of the day, it's good people. And everyone's good in their own way, but the right team for you,
Hmm.
I think is the key. But yeah, and I have a coach. I know you do some coaching as well, right, Carla?
Yeah, I do.
What kind of coaching do you do?
I do business coaching, so business strategy coaching.
Okay.
So I have my three different bricks and mortar businesses, and then I have the business consulting and business strategy. And that stemmed from when my dad sold his business. He basically hired me to sell his business and to do all the due diligence and try to find the buyer and to basically manage the entire M&A. And in doing so, we realized that my dad made a huge mistake at the very beginning
Oh,
when he set up the business, because we were new immigrants and we didn't know what we didn't know.
yeah.
And that mistake was so crucial that we had to backtrack 13 years worth of accounting, 13
Wow.
years worth of taxes, and try to figure everything out. And it was a very expensive endeavor. So in order for my dad to be able to sell his business and retire, this was 4 years ago. Um, it was extremely expensive, and he almost put his retirement in jeopardy. And that's when I realized um, how many other immigrants go through this, how many other people go through this, particularly immigrants. And then that's when I decided, after I had quite a fair bit of experience now in business, and in opening different types of businesses and managing different types of businesses and making a lot of mistakes and fixing my own mistakes, how can I apply that knowledge and help others not
Right.
make those mistakes? So I started with immigrants in mind. So I help immigrants start, grow, and scale their businesses. But over time, it's kind of morphed into underrepresented entrepreneurs, because in people started calling me and said, "Hey, I know that you work with immigrants. I'm not an immigrant, but I really want to work with you." And when I see the scope of my clients, they're women, they're people in the BIPOC community, a lot of Indigenous entrepreneurs, which is, I really love working with Indigenous entrepreneurs, people from abroad who want to bring businesses into Canada as well. So I have a lot of that as well. And yeah, and it's just basically, either I have clients from all stages in the business, whether they want to start or people who already have a business and they want to scale. What are those avenues? What are some of the operational systems that we can work on? What are some of the mindset issues that we can also work on? Because
Yeah.
mindset is huge as an entrepreneur. What are some of the things that we can fix in the accounting side of things? Are your books in order? What can we do in order to fix it? So I'm a generalist because I have experience with so many different types of businesses, that I'm able to be plugged in an individual's journey and try to figure out the best way to go forward.
Yeah.
And that's what takes the most of my time right now,
Oh, yes. Yeah.
and that is the love of my life.
Oh,
I
nice.
truly enjoy what I do, and that's what I want to be when I grow up.
Yeah.
And I'm at my best. That's my zone of genius, is
Awesome.
doing that, and truly is what I love.
Awesome. Awesome. What are your thoughts on where Canada is today, in terms of immigrants, in terms of foreign investors coming into Canada, and where do you think it could go?
Hmm. I was reading the other day an article that was saying that um, immigrant entrepreneurs are the fastest growing community that is starting tech companies in
Mm,
Canada.
yes.
Yet they only get 0.3% of venture capital
Right.
investment. So we have the fastest growing population in Canada that is getting the least amount of investment. And I think that is a huge missed opportunity for Canada, because people want to move to Canada. A lot of really bright talent is moving to Canada, and
Yeah.
they want to open companies, and they want to open successful companies. And there's a lot of innovative immigrants that are coming, and they're looking at Canada as a place to build their businesses. Yet there's a lot of roadblocks as an immigrant, like
Yes.
there's no funding available, or very little VC funding available, very little programs available. I would like to see I know the startup visa program exists. I would like to see a completely overhaul of that program, because it does not work. It's full of red tape. It takes a person, if they even make it into the starter visa program, about 2 years, 2.5 years to
Yeah.
immigrate to Canada. And by the time that, they even get a response, they're already looking at Singapore. They're already looking at Chile,
Yes.
because these
Yeah.
are two countries that have great starter visa programs where the government opens the doors, they help fund them, and they help grow these innovative entrepreneurs. So Canada is missing out because
Mm,
of the red tape of the immigration status in terms
yeah.
of these types of entrepreneurs. So I would love to see an overhaul on the starter visa program so that we can get great tech companies into Canada. And then I would love to see, we're already attracting a lot of great talent. And I mean, we've heard the story over and over. We don't give them enough opportunities because they have no Canadian experience. And I mean, we've lived it. So I would love to see some sort of program that overhauls that accounts for their international experience as a positive and not a negative.
Right.
And then also, I would love to see, because right now it doesn't exist, when you're immigrating to Canada. In the form, there is no check mark that you can tick to say, eventually I would love to open a business, or I'm interested in entrepreneurship in Canada. Because the government has all of this information that if they just add that option, that this particular person, this particular individual is interested in entrepreneurship innovation, it's just a tick box. And then
Yeah.
they could create a database so that they could funnel all of the information about entrepreneurship funding, economic development agencies and whatnot, to these individuals that have already shown interest,
Mm,
so
that's a
that
great
they're
idea.
so that they're not feeling that they're arriving into this country and then it takes them 10 years to open a business because they don't even know where to go. So
Yes. Yeah.
I could talk about this for hours, my friend.
No, I think this is such a crucial conversation. I'm very much focused on this, our businesses and myself as well. I had a great chat with MP Brad Renikoff, who's the MP from Edmonton.
Hmm.
And he has a private members bill looking at um, uh, recognizing the credentialing for immigrants coming to Canada. But he's also, I think he's on the immigration portfolio as well. And I was sharing with him some of the things that you had shared as well. But I think the box idea, the little tick box on entrepreneurship, is fantastic. Um,
Yeah, because it just starts adding a database that then
yes,
they can start feeding them information about it. So, this is your local, or this is like a list of all of the economic development agencies. This is, like the website for, like the federal business
yeah,
loan program, anything like. And I also think that Canada is missing the mark in creating something similar to the United States. United States has a fantastic, so the SBA, the Small Business Association, SBA dot, I think it's US or .org. Anyway, so it's like if you're a small business owner or a business owner or want to open a business in Canada, just go to the SBA website and there's everything there. Like depending
yeah,
on which state, you can find all the information under one portal. I
yeah,
mean, Canada's missing the mark. Why can't we have something similar to the SBA website in
yeah,
Canada where all you need to do is go to one website and then you can find all of the information regardless of which province and which municipality
yes,
you live. We
yeah,
have, like, it's a very segmented, like everything is so compartmentalized in Canada by provinces, by
correct.
municipalities,
Yeah,
that trying to find information on how to open a business, you have like 20 gazillion windows on
yes.
your browser open, and piecing that becomes very convoluted. Even if you're not an immigrant, it's just for
Oh,
everybody.
yes, yeah.
It's a it's a convoluted process. Whereas if you just have everything housed under one roof, it's, to me, it's a no brainer.
Yeah. Yes, yeah. I think, government is very much slow to change, but these are, great and important suggestions. A friend of mine is actually he started a, venture fund called, Flair Ventures, and he's focused on, immigrant entrepreneurs. I think they're just
They just
starting.
started, right?
They just started,
I
so
read about them recently.
oh, awesome. So I
Yeah.
need to, I'd definitely love to connect you because
Yeah.
the stats that you mentioned, he was saying something similar to me, and he's like, "This is the opportunity."
Absolutely.
And if you look at the unicorns in coming from Canada, it's all
It's all
immigrant
immigrants.
entrepreneurs. Yeah. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's a big one too in Boston. I've actually been toying with that idea of a VC fund for immigrant entrepreneurs. And there is an amazing one out of Boston that's what they do, and they've had a lot of their portfolio that they've been acquired. They've grown their unicorns, and it's like that's we have such great work ethic.
yes, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Um, Two things I want to close with, Carla, as a follow up for another conversation with you. But one is I'll be heading to Ottawa soon, so I hope I'll message you. I hope we get to
Yeah.
connect at some point. The other thing is for us at 369 Global, we're setting up in
Oh,
Mexico City.
no way.
Yeah, so I'd love to pick your brain on that and perhaps share the journey, the ups and downs, and the
Amazing.
adventures that we go through. But that'll be our team has already started discussions, but end of the year or beginning of Q1 next year, we should be starting things up there. So I'll keep you posted on how things go.
Hmm.
But I wanted to thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate we tried to connect a few times and it didn't work, but
Okay.
I really appreciate what you're doing. As I mentioned at the start, I think the authenticity, the honesty that you bring, the openness to share your ideas, I think really resonates with people. So, thank you for doing that, and I'll keep following you and liking the posts, and hopefully meet up with you in Ottawa soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to you and your audience, and I look forward to meet you in person.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Thanks, Carla.
Okay, take care.
Take care.